You are back with the Ecosystems podcast, and today, like we attempted last time, we're actually going to talk about a white paper that's to be released or has been released by Andrew. Andrew, why don't you just kick off today with telling us about this white paper? How did it come about? And who's the target audience? And what are you trying to address with it?
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. So the white paper is crafting your future-ready enterprise AI strategy, and it is a Microsoft and Cloud Lighthouse white paper that came out on the 16th, I think, of January. What we recognize with this paper is that when organizations are right now going and starting to think about how am I going to roll out and infuse artificial intelligence throughout the organization, many are doing so right now in a really, I think, fundamentally unstrategic way, right? It's like, let's go turn something on. Let's go build an AI infused workload to the loudest problem that we heard, right? We're not taking a strategic approach to it. And I think really importantly, many organizations are not doing, or maybe unprepared to do, some of the hard work around their data platform, whether it's consolidation of data into data services that are addressable by AI, or whether it's some of that data readiness work around data hygiene, governance, indexing, those sorts of things that are going to be necessary to make these really powerful AI workloads possible. And I started thinking about this a while back when the partner at a firm that is my client said, I want to do this amazing thing, and it should be really low-hanging fruit, right? Because it's AI. And I think he just assumed that this was going to be easy. So it occurred to me that organizations have a lot of work to do to begin to do this in a strategic way and to kind of correct some of the particularly data mistakes that they've made kicking the can down the road over the last 30 years when it comes to actually having a clean and proper data platform. So that's what the paper is about. It sets forth 5 pillars upon which to build an enterprise AI strategy. And the whole idea is to help organizations become future ready for the AI that we understand today and the AI capabilities that are coming in the very near and increasingly rapid paced future.
Well, that's a wrap for the first podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Chris is like, and it's a wrap.
And we're done.
We managed to repeat a summary of what we said in the last podcast. We're done.
So I have a question, right? Like, when you say data readiness, all right, now I'm slightly kind of playing devil's advocate here, purely because, number one, I feel like data is a different thing to everyone, right? And number two, I feel like perspective around things like security is quite important as well. Like, so when you say data readiness, you've got things like data hygiene, data distribution, that type of thing. What do you mean by data?
I think the intent here, right, is data in a pretty broad form, right? It is and a lot of people think only about the data that's really sort of close to their own job, right? So for some, it's structured data sitting inside of a database, right? So it could be your ERP or your CRM or a bespoke application that you've built. In some cases, we're talking about documents, unstructured data, so the files, the photos, the videos, the documents, etc. And in a lot more cases, we're actually talking about data that's sitting inside of a spreadsheet or an Access database or some sort of third-party application that is in no way addressable by AI today. This stuff is just littered across most organizations, and the larger the organization, the more of a mess I think it is.
All right. So my next question is, we're thinking around like structured and unstructured. What about things like phone call recordings and that type of thing? That's an important one, right? Because one of the things that I've started to discover about organizations is the moment we start talking about data, you're right too, I've broken it up into structured and unstructured, but like I feel like there's more to it than from a data landscape perspective. The example I'll give you is that insurance company is recording hundreds of phone calls. Okay. Mm-hmm. Where does that fit? is that unstructured transcriptions and things as well. Like I'm trying to
The
figure out,
multimodal aspect.
the multimodal thing. Like, is that getting...
Add to that digital exhaust, right? What are the things that you do, or the telemetry data that is formed out of a specific time it's done, a specific location it might be at, or all that other stuff, all the other data that's still been accumulated, but wouldn't be seen that, oh, I need to access that today by an individual in the organization, but could be very powerful to uncovering behaviors, patterns, opportunities.
That's the whole Microsoft Graph conversation as well. Like when you start plugging contextual data against structured and unstructured, you're starting to get like a really good view around what's going on. But I think like with AI, can we look at that as from a full picture perspective?
And that is the beauty of it, isn't it? It's one of the benefits that large language, native multimodal, let's keep building that sentence up, large language models can really bring to bear, because you can now start absorbing, as long as you have an intelligent data platform that allows you to reach into these different facets of dispersed, siloed and segregated data, you can now start getting into that. But that is what I would hope you meant by data hygiene, is bringing of those data points together.
But I think you can start really easily. Like, I think you can start very simple. Because whilst we want to be sophisticated and talk about like multimodal, data with your inbound calls, conversations, and transcripts and stuff like that, the reality is that, in my opinion, even if we have if one contact looks the same everywhere in all of the systems an organization has, then you're one step closer to be able to using AI. Like, I feel like you don't need to be that sophisticated. And in fact, I think that if you sell sophistication to that level to an organization, they're not going to buy it. They're going to be like, okay, fine. That's our strategy in 5 years. Thank you.
On that point, right? So one of the things that I found, and this is where, and I think, when we did one of the previous podcasts, we spoke about readiness for AI. Like, one of the things that I found, which is important, is that you get some organizations who are like, and Andrew, this is where I liked what you'd put around like data consolidation across the whole spectrum. You got to start somewhere. But when you start looking at the complex orgs, especially law firms, insurance companies, those types, it starts getting really interesting. They want the depth.
Yeah.
So when we're going in, those are the different levels. We're not finding anything in the middle. It's like, oh shit, we're here, or like we want to understand more.
One of the things that I've observed over the last year of some of the early adopter organizations really start to put workloads into production that have an AI component is that, because most organizations have spent years and years and years not tending to their data estate, really kicking the can down the road and saying, we'll let future us deal with the lack of investment we're putting into our data platform today, right? What I've seen a lot of is folks will build an AI infused workload and they're putting it into production, and they'll scurry around to get the data that they think this particular workload needs, stick it into its own data lake, right? Like, this is the data lake for this workload, right? And that's because there's no hope of going back and, by the way, it could be lake, it could be blob storage, it could be wherever whatever facility you're talking about. So right now we're in kind of a Band-Aid era where, a plaster era for most of you.
Oh, I finally understand what you mean.
Where folks are just doing just enough with their data in order to make the immediate workload function. And one of the points that I make very early on in the paper is that there are really, I think, two key principles behind your AI strategy. One is that your AI strategy needs to be able to absorb tomorrow what we don't understand fully today, right? And relatedly, your AI strategy needs to, the best investments you can make in AI are investments that are going to pay off in some way other than just the immediate AI workload sitting in front of you. So a great example of this is around data consolidation and the movement to a fabric architecture where you've got data in one lake and you're using that data to feed your AI workloads, but the organization is deriving benefit and return on investment from that consolidation in other ways as well, such as enterprise search or such as improved performance of analytical workloads. So those are the types of investments I think are really wise right now, because it's not just an investment in AI, but it's an investment in multiple other needs that most organizations have.
Absolutely. Oh, and one thing I just want to qualify, because we have different listeners, and even ourselves, we have different thoughts because of our scope of perception and our industries we work in. And what I mean by that is we started talking about complexity. Now, complexity is very dependent on first your perspective, but also the industry you're in. So actually what Chris discussed around bringing in call recordings and images and that is absolutely warranted for the legal industry, and high policy. Yeah. And then we start looking at other aspects such as high policy in central government, where you have people like, that take care of the environments, that need IoT aspects feeding in, water level quality, water quality itself, pollution, that will need to come back in along with other stuff so they can enforce. It's a complete necessity for their business. But if we went and spoke about that level of data feed, that level of complexity to a charity client, NFP, or even some commercials, that go, what? Wow, that's the future. That's universal way. And you're like, but to them, that's the most basic principle of value you can provide them to make their lives easier. So I just wanted to cap that off. One person's complex is the other person's necessity. And it all depends on where you're working, where your client is in the industry you're in, and the regulations you have to follow.
But at the same time, the tooling right now doesn't require organizations to go into very complex data models or very complex realities at all. Like, they can get quick wins straight away. All they need is a little bit of knowledge and open-mindedness. That's all they need, really.
All depends on their need. Absolutely.
Oh, I agree.
Well, so there's there in the paper there, I make a distinction between what I call incremental AI and differential AI. So the quick way to understand this is that incremental AI is artificial intelligence is a workload in AI that is going to bring greater efficiency, speed, precision, accuracy, whatever, to a task that a human probably would have otherwise performed. Okay. So most of the co-pilots are in this business, right? I listened to another podcast recently that was talking about how doctors and nurses are now taking inbound requests from their patients, and they're letting, AI is analyzing those requests and then writing the response and putting that response in front of the practitioner to say, yes, this looks right, send it off. And it's saving doctors and nurses hours and hours every day, right? But that would have happened anyway.
Do you know who owns a big chunk of that IP for that doctor medical scenario?
Who does?
Microsoft. When they acquired Nuance, there's a product called DAX, and DAX is what it does is it's been shown to shave about 2 hours a day off a medical practitioner's note-taking time. 2 hours a day, and the accuracy is like 99.x in what it can do. So it knows all the medical terms. It knows all the pharmaceutical drugs. It knows it has that. So when, how there's a joke in the medical industry, or anybody that tries to read a medical person's notes, they're unreadable. It's eliminating all that. It's eliminating the error of, oh no, that's not what my little squiggle meant. It meant that. They can just dictate it now, and the app just works on any mobile device they've got, feeds into the cloud behind it, into the server. And so, Nuance acquisition, that little DAX product is another massive bit of IP Microsoft has in the space.
That's interesting, and I wasn't familiar with that particular component as part of Nuance. But I was listening to, and we'll get back to differential AI in a minute, but I was listening to this podcast. Like I said, it's a New York Times podcast, and they were talking about AI a year on. And this was around the birthday of ChatGPT. And they almost sounded as if they were lamenting that, we have this brilliant thing, this thing that was supposed to be brilliant AI. And, all we're doing is saving some white collar people a couple of hours every day. And I was pretty floored by that level of pessimism, because as much as I think when we think about AI, we want to jump first to the sort of amazing, groundbreaking, we could never have done this in a million years if it were humans performing it. But the fact is that across the world, around the world, most societies are leveling off from a productivity perspective. So if we can save an entire profession, let alone the fact that, by the way, we have in most countries, we have a shortage of medical professionals. So if we can save an entire profession 2 hours a day or even an hour a day, in the aggregate, the productivity gains that means for society are enormous. So I'm not nearly as pessimistic that, all we're doing is, saving some people some time. That's big.
But it's life changing for a lot of people. In fact, today I read an article that between 2020 and 2022 in the UK alone, there have been over 300 deaths in women who are pregnant. Most of those women had kids before, so no one actually thought that they were at risk. And even when they tried to, I don't want to say blame, but even when they excluded COVID from these deaths, from these maternal deaths, they still were left with 8.5 in every 10,000 pregnant women in the UK alone. That's because, unfortunately, medical personnel is very limited, exactly like you said, Andrew, and they just don't have time to deal with any potential complication that may arise. So here's where AI could really help us. It could really, if we were to use it even in rudimentary use cases, where we're saying, if a person ever suffered from high blood pressure, then let's put them at risk for thrombosis, for example, which is like a medical term for blood clots in pregnant women. Then all of a sudden you have a short list of people who can be at risk.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you can deal with less. So we don't really have to, when you're talking to incremental AI versus differential AI, and everyone wants to do generative AI and they want to do the cool things, in reality, humanity can easily benefit from the most simple use cases of artificial intelligence with regards to data. And data doesn't even have to be complex or sophisticated or super relational, nothing like that.
And so can organizations, right? So, and this is where that differential versus incremental AI question, I think, is really important, because differential AI, those are, we could have called this moonshot AI or aspirational AI. Those are, I think, more the things that we sort of dream about, predicting DeepMind's AlphaFold, right? That has famously predicted the folding of proteins. And I'm far from an expert in the science here, right? But has done, this particular AI has done something that humans could have labored for many, many years and still probably never really achieved, right? But I think that organizations need to understand that they don't need the flashiest or the sexiest or the most groundbreaking AI workloads in order to derive value from their investment in artificial intelligence. And actually balancing your portfolio as a big organization, balancing the portfolio between incremental and more differential type artificial intelligence helps you manage risk that a single investment is not going to work out, because some AI investments won't work out, either because the technology is ready or you don't have the data to make it work, or it's not particularly applicable. So kind of balancing the risk of your investment across that spectrum of complexity is important.
So a few points on what we've discussed. I could not agree more. And I think starting with the simple allows you to adopt the complex as well, because it allows to build confidence. So I think, there's no mistake in the strategy of Copilot within Microsoft to show people how to leverage and get an AI and think about leveraging AI. I think customer service Copilot is one of the best Copilots I've seen, along with a few others, because it's very practical. It improves the experience of the content, and it improves the experience of the agent. It helps them both out. The web chat functionality grounded on your knowledge articles and your various SharePoint lists to then monitor the web chat while you're being asked questions and presenting the agent with I think this is the answer. You can have that up and running within a day if you really wanted to go for it, right? And your knowledge articles are there.
Right. And you will search the internet as well. So you don't even
Absolutely. And the other thing I want to comment on, just because it's a passion topic. So my background was medical genetics, and the protein folding one is very impressive, especially if you ever tried manually looking at something like that. But the other one that a use case that I've seen, and I think I may have commented this on a previous podcast, but as I'm here only 1 in 10, I can't remember. And that's around cardio. Yeah, exactly. There's always an excuse, and they're all terrible. So cardio oncology is a really good example where AI is starting to come into play, which is with oncology, obviously meaning cancer, the drugs and the medical practice towards cancer, which is, of course, quite a sensitive topic for most as well, and it affects most people. The medicine behind it's getting so good that actually it's not the cancer that kills you, it's the effects of the medicine of prolonging your life with cancer that gets you, and that's normally through cardiac events. So cardio-oncology is the study of the entwine between those 2 points of both the heart and the cancer you're going with. And what they've realized is if they can start tracking episodes, so every time you go in and you get your blood pressure done, you get your vitals done, that gets put against your record. And then you keep getting given the same drugs, and the doctor may occasionally adjust those drugs if they feel it is appropriate. But a cardiac event will occur. But they've noticed if they get loads of that data together, and it's not complex data, it's very simple data, it's just Andrew's come in and he's had these checks. Will's come in and he's had these checks. They're the same checks measuring the same things, but they can start tracking over time who's had adverse effects. And as soon as you get enough data on that, you can start tracking the micro changes based on the medicine given to adjust the medicine. And it's recommended then, well, you need to change this patient's medicine to X, Y, or Z based on these and these vitals. And that's another really good example of something that isn't entirely complex, but will have huge benefit to humanity.
It's the same in the study of diabetes or nutrition, Zoe, Zoe, the company, they do a lot of that. And all they do is they gather data and then they apply some predictions. But, Grant, I'm not that smart. I have no idea how to study genetics. I have no idea how to study nutrition or how things affect us as humans. That's just way too complex for me. But what I can do is apply some of the low code tooling that we've got right now. Organizations can do that straight away, even from reports. Like today, I was talking to Andrew because I was actually watching another podcast. I think it was from Nick Dolman and Ulrike. Really, really good. Great shout out for you, Mark, in that, by the way. Very good.
Was he really?
Yeah. Awesome shout out. But they were talking about data responses in Fabric, where you can hook up some Power Automate to your Power BI reports. And I incidentally went to actually look into that a bit more, and I found out that actually within a report, you can predict whether a certain record is going to be, cold, warm, and hot, and it's going to alert you when things are about to change. So even that, it's a sort of prediction and artificial intelligence that we could use straight away. And all of that is low code. Honestly, you don't have to know. I mean, it's great if you do know some genetics and actual machine learning and stuff like that. But if you don't, it doesn't mean that artificial intelligence is I will let 10 years from now me look into that. No, it's still right now.
Absolutely.
That's a good string for us to pull. I think probably in another episode is how I went into this a bit in the paper, right? Is how the role of low code in scaling AI across an organization. It's not enough to just consolidate your data and build an AI workload, right? But you have to scale it and actually infuse it into the culture of the organization. And low code, I think, is going to be a huge part of that. That is a string we should absolutely pull.
And I would go one step further and connect an extra string to that once we pulled that, which is I think going into the no code, the querying a pool of data, simple data or complex data, doesn't matter, by using a research canvas such as Project Sophia that we've seen coming along, to ability to state what you're trying to find out and then have that bring a UI actions and dashboards to you to then interrogate and receive insights that you do not need to be a specialist on to receive. I think that is also the future of where we're going to start seeing intelligent applications and intelligent research and BI going. And it's already there.
Oh yeah. One thing I'll add quickly is that when you look at the state of what's going on with low code, the anyone that's adopted low code in any organization is actually in a really good place to adopt AI. And low code and in Microsoft's Power Platform is the AI extensibility tool, right? Mm-hmm. So anyone that is using low code right now, congratulations, you're an AI extensibility expert. Crack on.
Nice. We're drawing to a close on this session. And one thing I just wanted to highlight right up front in the start of that paper was future ready, not future proof. And I think it even goes back, why it really resonates with me is the whole concept of ecosystems is around creating an environment to address the unpredictability without knowing what it's going to be before you get there, right? Creating a tool set, an infrastructure, an environment of where things can grow, whether they be ideas, whether they can be better ways of doing business. So I found that resonated. I think another, talking about threads that we need to consider pulling, is then across your data estate, addressing the role-based access no matter where that data is sitting, or making sure that people are not touching stuff. And, you know, a simple example I use for this is I don't want my colleagues to know my payroll data, right? It's still organizational data. It's there, but I don't want my colleagues knowing it necessarily. You know, I don't want them to be shocked at how much it is that I'm getting paid compared to them, right? And so we still consider that organizational data, but I feel that there's a whole thing around how do you make access to data, no matter whether it's sitting in an SAP system, an Excel spreadsheet, an Access database, a Oracle ERP, that the access is consistent across, that it's not that just somebody remembered to configure that system right, but how do you get that consistency of rights to access, read, write, update, etc. in the platform?
That's a huge area, I think, where actually the data platform and the application architecture is probably not sufficiently caught up to what we really need it to be right now. So I think on the one hand, it's going to be a huge investment for technology vendors such as Microsoft or Amazon, Google, et cetera, going forward. I think that Microsoft is holding more of the cards that will make it very successful at solving that problem. So I think that definitely worth pulling on.
Excellent. And with that, we'll get Chris to wrap the show for us.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for coming along. Andrew, I love the fact that you put this paper together. I think it's really, really interesting. And the 5 pillars are definitely something that I will be using in my day-to-day and talking to customers about. Yeah, absolutely. And I also enjoy the fact that you've made it understandable, which is very difficult because in this day and age right now, I'm actually busy responding to an email, trying to make it understandable. And I've used a couple of your points at the bottom, saying, hey, go and read this. So yeah, thank you very much. It's a very valuable piece of information, and I'm excited to see it, or see everyone else, or let everyone else see it at least. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming along. It's been epic.
Awesome. I'll add to that. If you want to be entertained while you read this document, use a screen reader with Snoop Dogg. That's what I did. Snoop Dogg. He read it to me, and yeah, he had the good smoke.